Hi and welcome to my channel, and welcome to Sopwell Nunnery, which actually isn't a nunnery and is also a ruin. And I'm going to take some very old cameras and take some pictures of it. Let's get on. Firstly, the place where I'm going. Sopwell Priory, also known as Sopwell Nunnery, was built around 1140 in Hertfordshire, England, by the Benedictine abbot of St Albans, Geoffrey de Gorham. It was founded as the Priory of St Mary's of Sopwell and was a kind of satellite of St Albans Priory. Following the dissolution of the monasteries, Sopwell Priory was bought by Sir Richard Lee in the 1540s. He was a military engineer for King Henry VIII and tore down the priory and built a house on this site, which he called Lee Hall. The house was later named Sopwell House. As I said, today I've got my two venerable old rangefinder cameras with me. One being my 1938 Leica 3B, and the other being my 1952 Canon 2D, not to be mistaken for the Canon 2D digital, which of course is a completely different kettle of fish. Strictly speaking, I've got too many camera bodies, and my rangefinders have been a bit left in the dark, or at least left in the cupboard, for the last, nearly 2 years. So I thought it was about time I took them out and gave them a good outing. My Leica 3B came to me as one of those always promised yourself one of those cameras. And at a shade under £300 for the body when I bought it, it was one of my more risky purchases, because let's face it, it's actually from my mum's birth year, 1938, but it survived pretty well, apart from its leatherette going brown rather than black, and it's lovely to handle. I'm not going to risk the wrath of true Leica aficionados by giving any form of a history lesson about Leicas, but the Leica 3 and the 3B were the series that followed the very popular Leica 2 and had the slow speeds that the Leica 2 lacked on a separate dial on the front of the camera. A second to a thousandth with the full range of speeds that the Leica 3s boasted, but they had a rangefinder that wasn't visible in the composition window or the viewfinder. It was a separate window. It was a bit later when Leicas actually got a combined viewfinder and rangefinder. The eagle-eyed amongst you, or those of you that actually read the titles on the screen, may notice that I'm only actually using one genuine Ernst Litz Leica lens, my 90mm Elmar. My other lenses are either Canon or they're from the former Soviet Union. I'm taking this shot on the little collapsible Industar 10 50mm. It's a gorgeous little lens. A Tessar design, I think. It's not a copy of a 50mm Elmar. I got this tiny lens pretty much free with a Fed 2 that I bought for £60, so the results I get from it are actually quite stunning. Swapping to my Canon 2D now. Pretty obviously, yeah, it's a Leica copy. Japan was absolutely full of American servicemen at the time, and this was quite a good thing to be selling to the troops, significantly cheaper than a Leica. And to be fair, a significantly heavier and a little bit cruder feeling too. That's not to take away from the Canon. Pretty much anything feels crude compared to a Leica. In one sense at least, the Canon's technically more advanced than a Leica in that it has a viewfinder and rangefinder combined, admittedly in the tiniest viewfinder window I think I've ever seen. What these Canons do have is that they feel really solid in the hands, certainly compared to a modern mirrorless camera or DSLR, and they are actually really cheap. You can get a 2D like mine for under £100 body only. And of course, they'll take all your Leica screw thread lenses. And of course the Canon ones. I've not really found any focusing issues with Russian lenses on either the Leica or the Canon. Some people report them. I just haven't found that. Wide-angle lenses at reasonable prices for rangefinders are actually quite difficult to get hold of. And, well, at least in Leica screw. And one of the few is the much maligned little Jupiter 12. I've got to say, it's a strange and quirky little lens that you have to stop down pretty well, and it flares if you so much as wave in the general direction of the sun, but it's got a lot of character, and it didn't cost a huge amount of money. Couldn't resist getting a little contrasty and moody with this shot. Back to the 50mm Canon lens on the Leica. Yeah, it is seriously sharp compared to pretty much every other lens that I have for rangefinder. Except perhaps the 90mm Elmar, but that has to be stopped down a couple of stops to get really bitingly sharp. The Leica is a little bit slower to use than the Canon, and that'll of course be the split viewfinder and rangefinder, but it also could be that I'm just not that experienced a shooter with rangefinders. Slowed down as I was being by the controls of, well, to be fair, both cameras, I was having enormous fun. There's something about the pace of working with the rangefinder. Yeah, I could get these pictures a lot faster with my Nikon F4, but this is just a lot of fun. In truth, it's rather unfair to compare the Leica and the Canon. The Leica was cutting-edge technology just before the Second World War, and the Canon was an attempt by Japanese industry to recover after the Second World War, and actually in its own way was quite innovative. Both are built to a standard that's very difficult to find in cameras other than perhaps Leicas these days. Of course, you still can buy a Leica that takes film. I believe it's the last film camera in production, I might be wrong. But you'll need very, very deep pockets. Leica mostly concentrates on producing digital cameras these days, and very fine ones they are. I have a massive soft spot for the old Canon 2D. It was the budget option even in its day compared to a Leica, but it's just such a pleasant camera to use, and whilst it's a little bit larger than the Leica and not so easy to fit into a pocket, it sits in the hand well and does everything you could ask of it. It feels like it was crafted with more thought than most of the rangefinders I've used from the former Soviet Union, and yet will probably cost you only as much as a Fed 1, which doesn't even have all the slow speeds. So the Canon's the winner then. My head says yes, and my heart just feels the satin chrome on the Leica, the like of which you won't see on another camera. It's so fine. A wind-on knob that after 80 years of use is still silky smooth. And of course that legendary sigh of a shutter release, which frankly makes the Canon sound like, well, a cannon going off. So I'm actually not going to name a winner here. I think if you have either of these cameras in your bag, you're probably a bit of a winner anyway. I enjoy using them enormously, and I enjoy the results I get out of them. I'm using them a little bit too little, and I'm going to make sure I use them more. It feels good. If you've enjoyed this, perhaps you'll think about hitting the like button. These likes really do the channel good. And, please send me your comments. I'd love to know if you use a rangefinder camera. If so, what camera you use. I know a lot of people use the later Canon rangefinders. Remember, if you really like the channel, then just subscribe. And it only remains for me to say, until the next video, take care of yourselves and keep taking pictures, alright?